Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Adventures of Adam. I'm Adam. Let's adventure. Today, we're going to be taking a look at some highlights from podcasts of previous Fateless podcasts where they bring up certain points that have got me super excited to play this yet to be named game. So, without further ado, I'm going to play the clip, let it play out, then I'm going to pause it and talk about why this particular moment got me excited for this upcoming game. So we'll let Brad and Hell Hades talk here first, and then I'll give you my thoughts.
That says, what is the design breakdown between the Fateless team and Magic Media? Will Fateless have writers and designers to create all the characters, storyline, game mechanics, with Magic Media doing the code development to bring it to life? Or will Magic Media be doing most of the creative process with input and feedback from the Fateless team? Very good question there.
So I guess for us, it was really crucial when we were talking to a number of different studios that we kind of got quotes from that, we control what goes on in this game. And by that, I mean, we set all of the creative direction and basically we work hand in hand with Magic Media. So Magic Media will employ all of the game developers. They will employ writers, but we might also employ a writer separately to their team, honestly. And basically they will create our vision. That's the kind of vibe here. So, any of the kind of game modes, honestly, it's become more like a discussion between us and them as if we're all part of the same team. It's like, here's our idea board, there's their idea board. We're kind of like looking at different artistic styles. We're looking at different kind of game ideas. We're looking at other competitors in the genre already and kind of like seeing what's cool and what's not there. And then we're kind of piecing it all together. But ultimately, they employ a lot of the kind of work for hire, and we try and give them great direction for a fun game.
So what I love about this is because they went with Magic Media. If you don't know, they're a media company who does like art, story, writing, like all that stuff. They're paying Magic Media to make the art assets for them. But at the end of the day, the team at Fateless has complete and full control. They have the final say in everything, and it's Magic Media's job to bring the Fateless vision to life. And to me, that's really exciting, especially if you've seen the art assets that have been leaked so far. The game looks amazing. So, Magic Media is doing a great job, and they're working wonders with the Fateless team. And it's got me super stoked.
I think summed up really well when it's like anyone can get to the same place. That's
So, I forgot that I chopped this stuff up to make the video more streamlined. So the topic they're talking about right now is free-to-play versus pay-to-win. So, I'll shut up and let Hell Hades talk.
kind of like one of our driving forces, but if you pay, you get there quicker. That's basically what the pay is pay to play faster, not pay to win. And we're thinking of some pretty interesting mechanics around how do we do arena in a non-pay to win way. So we've got some stuff which we'll probably talk about in a separate video because it's quite complex, but ultimately we're drawing from other games, other genres even, in terms of what do they do to make a really fun experience, but not necessarily a pay to win experience. But we also have to like face it up. This game's going to cost millions of dollars to build. We absolutely have got to make money out of this game. We're not going to hide behind the fact it's not going to be free game and there's no revenue and stuff. There'll be packs to buy if you choose to buy them. We don't want to be coming across in this kind of like greedy, big corporate business type of way, but there will be packs to buy. And if you want to, buy them and progress faster, then that's cool too. It's almost like we want to drop this whole, am I a free to play a label? Because we don't really want it to matter. It's just, are you enjoying the game, playing at your pace? And, if you are someone who wants to drop a load of money, that's fine. But if you're not, that's fine too.
So basically what they're saying is they want the game to be accessible. They don't want to have any hard paywalls. The only thing spending money will do is allow you to progress faster. And to me, that is amazing. Yeah, I'm a player who particularly enjoys the free-to-play grind. I enjoy grinding. I play Raid Shadow Legends. I do free-to-play challenge accounts and stuff. But yeah, I think that's great. And the fact that they're trying to figure out a way to incorporate some sort of PvP system that isn't pay to win, to me, is just so exciting, because player versus player is only fun when every player is on the same footing. So if they could nail the normalized PvP system, I think the game is going to be wildly successful. I hope they do. I'm hoping it's good, but I'm having faith, and I'm looking forward to seeing what they come up with.
I think a little bit earlier where we talked about, this is going to be Hero Collector RPG, familiar with Raid.
Yeah, I
We
think
do
this
have
would be
some
more
really
like
cool-
dungeons, clan boss, Doom Tower, different like core mechanics. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say the main things, like the staples of this genre, you expect them, right? You're going to see the best version that we can come up with, basically, of these things. We do have some really interesting new features that we're toying around with. Obviously, we can't talk about these specific features, but at the core of the game, it's not going to be a tower defense. We can pretty much already say that. We have played with some ideas around like side games and like different ways to use your champions, but at this stage right now, we're probably not ready to say like these are going to be the core features. Like, we know the characters are going to have stats. We know that we're going to be able to give people characters equipment. We know you're going to have to fight bosses and battle in a campaign that's specific to the IP that we're going to be building upon. So we know that those core things exist, but I think saying like, oh, these are going to be the core the core mechanics, it'd be a little bit early. Like, we pretty soon we should be able to start talking about like, oh, we've decided that this is going to be something that's, I guess, a big differentiator in the market for our game. But right now we're just at that pre-production, like giant funnel of ideas, and then filtering, and then compressing it into like the diamond, hopefully, that this game will end up being.
The reason that's exciting to me particularly is the when it comes to these hero collector RPGs, to me the best part is hero customization, like building masteries, looking for the right stats, getting the right gear. How do I want to build this champion? Are there multiple ways that I could build this champion? And of those multiple ways, which way will benefit my account the most? Being forced to make these important strategic decisions, in my opinion, is a must for this type of game. So the fact that they're going to have some sort of gearing system where you equip and customize your champions, to me, that's like music to my ears. I'm glad that's the direction that they're going, and also glad they're not doing a tower defense. Not my thing. I know there are plenty of people who probably play Watcher of the Realms. No offense, just not for me. So anyway, that's what that clip was about. Just really excited to hear it.
Now, IP's been a kind of like a big talking point throughout the community. We have had a couple of challenges with IP, I'm not going to lie. Firstly, there was a couple of companies that decided that Fateless were too new as a business, as a game studio, to work with us. We presented too much of a risk to their company, and they decided that actually, despite liking the project and liking our approach, they weren't going to work with Fateless, which was a shame. We then went on this kind of like road of working with a couple of IPs right the way through to kind of like legal conversations, pretty deep. And in the end, we've got to this position where we feel like the restrictions they're trying to put on us as a studio are not right for the community, and they're not right for us. So actually, we're going with our own IP, which we're super psyched about, which is going to be Myths and Legends of Old in all different origins. So I'm going to walk you through what that's going to look like. I'm going to talk you through our first kind of like faction that we started to flesh out, and one of the main concept heroes for that. But we believe this is absolutely the right path for the game.
So in regards to the IP, I think this is great because they're not having to pay an IP for the privilege to use that IP and then give that company a share of their profits forever, and then be forced into a box and not have full creative control of their own game because they're tied to this IP. That's really exciting for me, because that means that these guys are going to be able to make exactly the game that they want to make. Now, I think that the Myths and Legends is a great place to start for them, and I'm glad they're going that route. But what I would love to see, more than anything, is for them to branch out, get really creative, and start creating their own original characters, and write backstory for these characters and how they became, like, rose from nothing and became legends and gods and whatever. Like, I would really like to see them form their own unique original characters so that when they go forward in the future, branch off and make more games, they can build upon that foundation of their own unique original characters and like create a unique and special IP. To me, that would be amazing. I don't know if they're going to go that route or not. I've mentioned it multiple times in the Discord. It's something that I believe firmly in. Even if they don't, I'll still play the game because at the end of the day, gameplay is the number one most important thing. If the game isn't fun, then I'm not going to play it. If the game is fun, I will play it. But right now, it's looking like I'm going to play it. It just everything I've heard about the game so far just got me really excited.
It's the cool thing about going in this direction is it's pretty much like us going with a really well-known IP. In fact, most of the gods, the myths, the legends of old are some of the real origins for the big IPs which exist today. So when we're bringing out characters, and the main reason we wanted an IP was that we wanted to create characters that you would love to collect. And we think we're going to absolutely nail that with this direction right now. Because we're not spending the millions of dollars on an IP, we're actually able to work with some really cool people in the industry to produce something which we think is going to be a far better gaming experience. We brought on I
didn't pull any clips from specific episodes, but they have had some titans of the industry on their podcast in recent weeks. These are some of the more recent ones where they talk about their cinematic director, like stuff like that. Like the people who they're talking to and having connections with, because they didn't have to spend these millions of dollars securing an IP, they now have the funding to branch out and spend that money elsewhere. So it's actually really big and really exciting. I think at the end of the day, it's really going to help them make a much better game.
concept artist in Fateless's team, as well as employing more artists with Magic Media. And we've also brought on a narrative writer. In fact, it's one of the writers for the World of Warcraft Classic game. So he was around when WoW Classic was coming through, and he was one of the narrative writers for those. We are working up some really exciting storylines, lore, etc. for our game. That's going to be a separate video, but we're able to kind of like reinvest some of that cash into other areas as well. So yeah, so working through this story, we're looking to bring something to life, which basically envelops you as a player. What we will do when we start to kind of like drop some of the storytelling and the lore through these type of videos, we'll probably bring you some little short stories, some little clips around the type of direction we're going in. We'd love to get your feedback when that comes through. I'd also love to hear your feedback around this kind of like change of direction. One thing that it does lead us to do, it leaves a door wide open once our game launches with this type of kind of myths and legends approach to work with well-known IPs to do short-term collaborations. And we've already got a couple of those which are interested when we launch. So that type of thing is still on the cards and actually really exciting as well. So I'm going to take you on a whistle-stop tour of the art that we're doing, but just, I guess, rest assured, we want to maintain full control of this game. We want to make sure that we develop a game that the community will love, and that's why we've gone in this direction.
I honestly think it was the right choice. I have nothing but faith in this team that they're going to do a good job. So knowing that they're going to be able to maintain 100% artistic freedom and full control in all the decisions just has done nothing but bolster my hype.
I mean, we obviously spent quite a lot of money pursuing an IP. And I think in hindsight, the more we looked into it, the more we realized how limiting that was going to be for the overall project. And the reality is, it's like, yes, an IP will bring external people to the table. But that being said, we're still creating a game that we would want to play. And the problem is, and people probably don't realize, is by creating a game which is solely based around an IP, I don't mean just incorporating an IP into your game, but you're effectively paying them for the right to make a game for them. And they have decision-making skills over what the game looks like, what it feels like, and the abilities that things people can characters and things like that in the game can do. You have to effectively pay them for the right to create a game for them, and then they still take a proportion of your income as well forever, which, you know, financially sounds crazy, but at the end of the day, the footing that it would give you from having the backing of a recognized IP is usually worth it from a business sense. Now, I guess from our perspective, and we don't know whether it's going to be the right choice or not.
I think you made the right choice, guys. I believe in this. Don't look back. Keep all gas, no brakes.
But the reality is, the more we looked into it, the more we realized that developing our own IP not only would give us that freedom, but as a company moving forward, it would put us in a much stronger place. Now, whether that was a mistake or not, I mean, we're yet to see. But personally, I've backed the idea of creating our own IP from day one.
I kind of wish they would have done more of this, where they just created their own original characters. I mean, I don't mind the myths and legends, but I think it would have been so much cooler to see original characters. But if you've seen some of the art assets that they're doing, even though these are like known entities in the worlds of myth and legends, their take on these heroes is so interesting and unique. Like a lot of them you may not even recognize. Like at some point they showed a brief clip of the Hades character, and it just looked insane. Like on the same level of badass as like Bad Alcazar in Raid Shadow Legends. They look good.
But we are a team, so I also saw the value in pursuing an IP as well. But for me, the challenge of building our own IP from scratch was always like super exciting. So yeah, I think that's probably one thing that we would sort of change from day one. But the reality is, I think we probably had to explore that option first because it was the safer option for us as a new company. But yeah, we'll see if that plays off, I guess. What about
and
you
it made
guys?
a lot of good connections as well. So it wasn't a
Absolutely.
total loss.
For sure, yeah.
So what Brad was saying about the connections is through the act of exploring the acquisition of the rights to use an IP, they made a lot of connections in a lot of areas so they can do crossovers in the future. So that's really exciting too. So the door's open for these sort of crossover type events like you see in Raid with like Ninja, Ronda Rousey. There could potentially, I don't have any inside information, I'm just using this as like a vague example. They could have like a Lord of the Rings crossover at some point, and you could potentially have the option to collect Gandalf or Frodo or, you know, like these well-known entities inside other universes. So to me, that's really cool too.
If let's say we want to try and put this game out back end of 2025, which feels reasonable.
So the reason I highlighted this clip is because he's talking about how if the game isn't ready, they're not going to launch it. And this is so important. These days, the culture is such that the investors want to rush the game out so they can start seeing return on their investment sooner. But what they're saying is they're not going to release the game until it's done. And as excited as I am to play this, I would much rather them take their time and wait until they have a finished, polished product. Because if the game releases and it sucks on release, it's going to gain a reputation for being a shit game forever. And it doesn't matter how many patches come through, the first impression, you only have one chance to make a good first impression. So I am so excited to hear that they care more about finishing the game and releasing a good final product than they do about just getting it out there, period. So I'll let Hell Hades talk more about his stance on it, but this is so exciting to me, and I'm so glad to hear it.
If it feels like some of the champions are not up to the level that we want them to be, won't release the game at that point. Like if it feels like the features are not as complete as we want them to be, or there's not as many as we wanted in that time period, then we won't release the game at that point. So ultimately, I think we're putting a lot of pressure on ourselves because we don't want to into this genre with an average title that can do okay. Like basically, we want to come into the genre and have a game defining sort of moment. We want to come in and basically be at the top of the genre in terms of quality of game, quality of visuals, number of cool characters that you could get. And the more we're kind of like diving into the myths, legends theme and seeing so many cool potential characters from different areas that perhaps I've never even looked into before, it's going to be really exciting. So, but yeah, we won't do that though. We won't just kind of come in with a load of shortcuts to make a time.
Yeah.
That is just so gratifying to hear. That one statement, more than any other, has just done nothing but bolster my confidence and the competence of this team.
You have to have a very, very unique set of people with really good vision, really good passion, really good drive. It's not a problem you can just throw money at. Like we see all these studios like Amazon, they just want to throw money at making New World. Like, here's $500 million, give me a hit. You can't do that because you have to have a certain amount of vision and passion to bring it to life. And you see this with some of the newer Blizzard type stuff. They're not like the old school Diablo RPG grinders. They're just people who went to college and got a job in game design.
So what they're talking about in this episode is the lack of passion that goes into game development and what's happening to AAA studios. So what Brad is saying is Blizzard isn't the force that it used to be. The people who are making the games now are just casual people who thought it would be cool to get a degree in game design or game development, and they're not the people who no-lifing in their mother's basement grinding out RPGs 24 hours a day. They're not the same passionate gamers. They're just people who are like, oh yeah, that'd be a fun job. I'll get a degree in game design and go work for a big corporation. And that's what Blizzard has turned into, unfortunately. And that's what Brad is speaking about here, and it's what they will continue to speak about as I play the clip. Just giving you some context.
And
well, you're exactly right, because limits breed creativity, right? So like when you give someone limitless funds, and you're just like, yeah, make whatever you want. Well, you're not going to get creative with any. You're going to, the industry standard is, this many polys, and this is what characters look like, and this is what you're going to be caught up in the details of like spending your money, right? And I think like this idea of these small teams being able to create something amazing is because you're like a scared animal backed into a corner. Like you have no other options than to innovate, than to be creative and interesting, and that's what people latch onto.
So in this clip, this is Paul. You may know him as Saphira from HH Gaming. What he's talking about in this clip is like how they're going to go about making hero balance in their game. So I'll just let him talk. But I just wanted to give you some context of what he's talking about before he starts talking. That way you kind of know what's going on.
The path to success for making every champion relevant is creating compelling strategic reasons why you would use that champion over the legendary champions, or you make it so like, some of the things that I've had when we talked about running different tournaments and things is instead of making it a punishment, make it a reward. So like, for example,
bonus if you do that.
If we ever tried to do an arena tournament, everyone would be like, what's the point? Everyone's just going to pick Taras. When we were like, well, okay, well, you can pick Taras if you want. I'm not going to punish your roster, which is what Sintranos does. It punishes you because you can't use your roster.
Mm-hmm.
But actually what they should do is you should do stuff like, well, if you happen to use a rare champion, you get double the amount of points. Or if you Dragon Age do this very well because they kind of have like this model where it's like, well, this boss takes 200% more damage from fire. So then you have to build a fire team. And eventually you start running out of like the legendaries and you go, okay, well, actually, I'll use this rare because this rare is quite good. You create relevancy for all your heroes then because the content makes it relevant. Whereas I think every game has that problem because every game you'll progress, right? You start off with wanting to use any champion because you're just bare bones in.
What I have. Yeah.
You're always going to progress whether you're doing it via champions, whether it's gear design, that 4-star gear that I had 4 years ago would have been amazing. I sell it within like the first 3 weeks now because I'm up to 5-star. I don't really care about the rest. So you always need a level of progression. There's not really much you can do about that because otherwise the game feels like it's just giving you everything you don't want if you don't have that progression. But yeah, I for me, it's always about make the content make the champion strategically relevant.
Yeah.
Try not to make the champions more powerful so that they make them relevant.
So what he's basically saying there is the way you design the content makes it so you don't necessarily have to power creep your champions when you're building new champions just to keep them relevant. If you want to create new interesting champions, the way you do that is you create a new type of content and then you release new champions that are designed to beat that content. That way it makes new champions interesting and exciting without necessarily having to just straight up power creep them. So to me, it sounds like they've got a good plan, and I'm excited to see how it plays out.
Kind of like point out is that it's far more interesting in my mind to have a little like there's just gonna be power creep over time that just kind of happens, right? But if instead of being forced into power creep because you're like, well, people are bored, so they want new champions, and those new champions have to be better. If you just add new challenges that are interesting and outside of the general pool of what's easy to do with the established meta, then you can introduce new champions that are solutions to those problems, and that becomes a really interesting cycle, like a far more interesting cycle than just going like, well, this guy's got to have 50 more attack because everyone else has 1700, whatever the number is, base attack. Like, so that's more, I think, the way that the approach that we're taking is like have really cool, interesting problems that need to be solved, and then give you some tools and let you figure out how to solve them.
Such a breath of fresh air to hear. Like it. Again, like these are just clips from random podcasts that I've heard that just got me really excited. Like specific things in particular about their game design philosophy overall that's just got me hyped. So
back to like right from the top, we were talking about having to make bosses that almost like the first priority, because once you've got 30 bosses or whatever we need, then you need to design champion kits. And it might be that, okay, well, a rare probably only really should thrive in one of these scenarios.
Yeah.
Or maybe like a star.
So what he's saying here is that they're designing the bosses first so they know what the boss mechanics are, so that they know how to design champions to be good or specialists against these bosses, or maybe an array of bosses. So it just makes so much sense,
Starter would be in a few more, but let's say it's one. An epic maybe thrives in like 5. And a legendary maybe thrives in 5 to 10. Like, so it depends what they need to, like you said, Sham, what problem they need to solve with the bosses. It's kind of like how we need to build kits so that there's always a purpose, even if it's a common. It might be that they're a poor option, but they do a job in this area.
That just reminded me of a story. So when I first started playing Raid Shadow Legends, I was struggling with the spider. And I typed in general chat, like, hey, I'm struggling with the spider. Anybody have any tips? And someone was like, yeah, just use lots of AoE. So I was like, all right, cool. So I'm going through the champions that I have, and I'm looking at their kits, and I see this common Sister Militant who has an AoE on her A1, and that's her only skill. I'm like, all right, cool. I'll just build 5 Sister Militant. So I did. I leveled up to level 50, and it got to like Spider 8 or 9 or something like that. But I mean, it obviously didn't take me to 20, but it did allow me to make short-term progress in the early game using commons, and eventually I upgraded, and that's what they're talking about here. It's just like the natural progression. Does everybody do that? No, probably not, but the fact that I had that option available to me, and I did it, and it allowed me to progress in the short term until I got access to better champions, like it's just so cool. Like, it's just, progression is important. Upgrading your champions is important. A lot of people want to say, like, why even bother with uncommons or commons? If you don't have those champions, you don't have the ability to obtain them, evaluate them, decide that they're worth building short term, and then feel that feeling of progression when you pull the rare, and then later on pull the epic, and then later on pull the legendary, like better versions of these other champions, and you feel that account progression. It's very important to the RPG genre. Like, progression is everything in these games. And having commons and uncommons who can serve, even if it's just for like the first 3 or 4 days of your account or the first 2 weeks. Just having something that you can then replace and upgrade is massively important. And I think a lot of people are a little bit too short-sighted to realize that, or too stubborn to admit that they need that. They'd rather just get nothing but rares and epics and legendaries. You know, you got to eat your vegetables too. You can't just have your chocolate, okay? Eat your veggies.
Yeah.
And then hopefully you would get the epic upgrade or the.
And then you
or the-
upgrade, and it feels exciting to get that upgrade because then you're
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, I built this champion, it's working, but I can, you know, shave a bunch of time off my run. I can be more efficient. I can whatever. I can like that. That's what we're looking for. Like those moments are what. That's why we play these games, right?
And that's it. There's still a ton more podcast episodes that I didn't pull clips from. This was just like from the first 20 podcast episodes, which took me about 20 hours to sift through all of it and find the highlights. I'll probably do some more of these where I showcase some of the art that's been made and really do my best to highlight the things that I think are special and unique about this project in that regard. But this was just intended to cover like their game design philosophy and where they stand on a bunch of different issues. Hopefully, if you hadn't seen those were fresh and new to you, and they have got you as excited and hyped for the upcoming, yet-to-be-named Fateless game as they have done so for me. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully, I will see you in another video soon, but until next time, everyone, take care.